as gambling continues to take off in North America, we are seeing both the huge growth and increasing concerns about how best to protect players. Now, this panel is going to discuss the role of technology and advancing player protection and responsible gaming. I'd like to welcome to the stage Jonathan Doubilet, MD and VP Operations US Playtech. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you for joining us today. Great panel we have here. We're focusing on the role of technology in advancing player protection. I was already introduced, but with me here are, basically I'm humbled to be in the presence of such individuals. Daniel Umfleet, founder and CEO of Cambridge Behavioral Health. Afshien Lashkari, Lab Director, New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement, otherwise known as the NJDGE. And Adam Warrington, Vice President of Responsible Gambling at FanDuel.
The first question actually is going to be addressed to you, Adam. Can you tell us a bit more about how the group is using technology to identify and communicate with at-risk players, and how effective do you see this in terms of the approach prompting players to moderate their play, basically their time and spend?
Yeah, very pleased to be here and be part of this panel. You know, from the FanDuel perspective, I think we're privileged, we're very lucky. We're part of Flutter globally. And being part of Flutter gives us an advantage to collaborate with the other divisions within Flutter. So our division in the United Kingdom and Ireland, in Australia with Sportsbet, Flutter International, which operates in a number of jurisdictions. Those other jurisdictions are far more mature. And the learnings from those jurisdictions help us as we develop technology and develop best approaches to kind of reach out. You know, a key learning from us, which I know other operators have as well, is the collaboration internally. How we work with our AML team on transaction monitoring, and the flags that come up and how our RG team can kind of jump in on those flags. Our risk and trading team, when they're seeing unusual activity and flagging that in the processes we have internally. Our fraud team as well. How we work together, taking any silos away, to discuss cases, to share flags, to communicate with our customers is a tremendous advantage that we have learned being part of Flutter and from our other divisions as well. You know, for us, it's also all about awareness and education. And we'll talk about DG best practices in a second, which have been a great opportunity for us to implement here this year. How can we connect with customers at the right point in time? How can we make them aware of the tools that we have for them to set limits? You know, when we talk to customers, there's still large gaps of awareness around tooling that's available to moderate their play, to set a deposit limit, to set a wager limit, to set a time limit, to understand their spend, to go to their player activity statement. How much did I wager last month? How much did I win or lose, right? Am I canceling withdrawals? Understanding your play leads to more sustainable play as well. So maybe it's a good point to pause to kind of, as we go on to DG best practices, but that trigger reporting within New Jersey, where I happen to live, and obviously is very important to FanDuel, has been very critical for us as we understand further how and when to communicate with customers and how to educate, what kind of resources, whether that's an email, whether that's a video explaining how our tooling works to enable them to moderate their play.
Well, that actually, thank you very much. That brings me to my next question for Afshien. You guys led the way in New Jersey in terms of implementing a policy which basically dictates that some sort of technology must be used in order to prevent harmful gambling, promote responsible gambling. Can I just ask, what prompted you to revisit the basic rules and regulations that were written?
No, it's a great question. It's something that for us, ever since the launch of online gaming, responsible gaming to us was going to be a very critical success factor. And so we are continuously looking at it from a perspective of how we can improve. And it wasn't just with the best practices. Even before that, legislation requires that there's an annual study that's conducted by Rutgers University to go over how responsible gaming can be improved. And there's a lot of initiatives that study came out with that we've mandated. And a lot of the credit, I think this needs to be said, needs to go to the industry. I don't think that's said enough in terms of how much the industry does to ensure all the different requirements for RG are implemented quickly. And so that's one thing that I did want to stress today, is that as we go through all the different things we've mandated, it is important to know that the industry that we've been working with does a very nice job of implementing these very quickly. But going back to the various RG initiatives, it all started with the idea that we need to constantly look at RG and realize how critical it is and make improvements. And whether it was, like I mentioned before, the annual study that's conducted, evaluating that, implementing certain features from there, we then decided to look at it from a new perspective recently where we said, okay, we've made these changes that have helped RG, but what else can we do to improve RG? And that's where we decided we want to really combine technology and the data that we know that operators are already collecting. And that was the key piece to it, was we knew the operators were collecting this information already. All we wanted to do was use that information for a different angle. And so we worked with the industry, and that was another key part of this, is we wanted to collaborate with the industry throughout the entire process. Because for things like this, for it to really be as successful as possible, you need that collaboration amongst all the stakeholders. And so we started the path by going and evaluating what different triggers should we be looking at that's already being collected, whether it's wager information, deposit information, cool-off information. Are there scenarios where someone cools off and then once the cool-off period expires, they cool off again? Turnover information about the patron. And we ended up creating two main categories. You had your game activity triggers, and then you had your account activity triggers. And within each category, there's different flags that can be set. And what we really wanted to do was not necessarily say, if you have a situation where Shane is a patron, for example, has a trigger go off on his account because maybe he has deposited too much in a short amount of time period, maybe it's too much turnover in a short time period. We weren't necessarily saying that every single time a flag occurs, that means you might have an at-risk patron. We were just giving the operators the available information to now do their due diligence. Because there's a lot of triggers that when we look at it, doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem if it's a flag. It just means, let's look at this. And for example, one of the triggers that we have is if you notice that as a patron, Shane is now spending a lot more time online than he was for a previous time period, that's one of the flags that can go off. But that could also be a false positive. A good example would be maybe Shane as a patron only wants to bet on the NFL. He doesn't want to necessarily play casino, but he just wants to bet on the NFL from September to January. But then once January, the Super Bowl happens, he's not going to be online anymore until September again. Come September, FanDuel may see, hold on, an alert went off for Shane. He's spending a lot more time online in September than he did in August, July, June. However, it all makes sense as they look at my account and realize it's only because he likes to wager on football. So for us, we want to start that process of having those triggers that could initiate that due diligence. But we want to go one step further. We wanted to say, okay, well, that's the foundation. But the next part was going to be the intervention part. We wanted to set guidelines in terms of, Adam did a nice job of bringing this up, making sure that they reach out to the patron when necessary. And so if you have certain flags that go off on your account based on the triggers that were pre-established, you might get an email. If they see continuous activity that is raising concern, you would get the video tutorial. And then if they see additional triggers that are going off on the patron's account, that's when, this is the second piece of the best practices that kicked in, there would be a dedicated RG team that would reach out to the patrons. There would be a human element to it. And so it was really just continuing our thought process of wanting to improve RG as much as we could, and that's what really drove us to where we were and where we are today. But one quick important thing is that this is only the beginning of it. We try to really work closely with the industry to say, well, it's been implemented since January 1st. Let's talk about now what you've seen. Are there things that you think are helping? Are there things that maybe you can come back to us to say, you know what, this trigger doesn't give us as much information as we thought it would, but how about we modify the trigger in this way? Or how about we add this additional trigger? So it's a continuing process. It's not something that we're going to say we got exactly 100% right, but it's something that will continuously improve until we get it as robust as possible.
Thanks. A bit off script, but do you foresee this happening in other states as well?
It's a great question. It's something that if someone was to ask me, what do you hope for in terms of what other jurisdictions will do? It is something that if an entity has these tools available and they're using it for one jurisdiction, why not just use it across the states? And it's not just for responsible gaming that I think that's critical for. KYC, cybersecurity best practices, there's all these other initiatives that maybe some jurisdictions have regulations for and others don't. In an ideal scenario, all jurisdictions would have those same requirements because at the end of the day, and I know this has nothing to do with responsible gaming, but it's a good example of why if all jurisdictions require the same standard helps so much. In New Jersey, there's a requirement for cybersecurity and multi-factor authentication. Part of it is to ensure that if someone tries to hack into your account, it could stop it at that point because they won't have the PIN that you need to enter. But as you evolve and you have single sign-on accounts across multiple jurisdictions, if you don't have that across all jurisdictions, there could be gaps in vulnerability. So same thing with RG. If we've already implemented for one, why not try to protect it for all jurisdictions?
Okay, thank you. Next question is addressed to you all. Whoever wants to take it, put up your hand. But what are some of the most promising ways that data analytics and technology are helping to improve player protection and responsible gambling? How can industry stakeholders more effectively share insights, findings, and research to raise player protection standards?
I'll take it.
Daniel?
Yeah, sure. I think our group works at sort of the intersection of where responsible gambling starts and where mental health treatment kicks in for gamblers, right? So we do a lot of data crunching at a public health level, at a population health level, and we collaborate with a handful of operators and state regulators to kind of keep an eye on things and help develop systems. From what I've seen so far, I think we've got a really good shot at developing some very good systems. And I think the more collaboration that we get across the board, the better things are going to become. I still have some questions around, once we get into the AI section, I think it's all well and good identifying. I think it starts to become a little bit more of a complicated process once you identify and know that there needs to be a next step. And I think that that's a piece that we need to work on across the board. And so for us, putting solutions in that space is sort of the ecosystem that we live in and helping the states carve paths forwards for population health strategies and public health strategies when it comes to RG and setting up treatment infrastructure for the state. So that's my initial thoughts.
From our perspective as an operator, we're doing a lot of work to understand more why people are using tools and when. So, for example, we can easily quantify how many people have set a deposit limit in any jurisdiction. Okay, but let's break that down by cohort. Is there a difference between a 25-year-old to a 55-year-old? How long does it take for them to apply that limit? And we're learning it takes about 5 to 6 months in general across the jurisdictions we operate in. What can we do to speed that up? Is there something else we can do in their user journey to do that? Last year, we deployed an interstitial in our product before NFL last summer to all new customers and all customers 25 and under, right? Because we still know from our research, there's still a large awareness gap around RG and RG tools. What does responsible gaming mean, number one, and how would I apply it to my play? Why would it make sense for me to apply a tool or just to understand more about what I'm spending, winning, losing, et cetera? So when do we connect with them, and how can ideally we speed up when they're applying a tool? Because from our perspective, it's very simple. Our hope is for sustainable customers. It's not for customers with us for 2 months. We don't want anyone to crash and burn. We don't want to have someone who's going to develop a problem and have to kind of go to some of the research that the treatment, that Cambridge can provide. We want them to stay with us and understand what's responsible for them. Gambling is supposed to be entertaining, right? It's supposed to be fun. It is not supposed to be, it's not a way to make money. It's a way to enjoy the experience. If you're betting a sporting event, if you're iGaming, if that's allowed in the jurisdiction, et cetera. So how can we reach them? How can we use those analytics to understand when the right time to connect with them? We're making progress. There's a lot more work to do.
Anybody want to add to that, or no?
I was going to say, I think they covered it perfectly in terms of the key points, awareness, education, trying to identify the potential at-risk patrons as soon as possible, informing them what's available.
Great. Actually, this next question is for Dan. And I know Kindbridge quite well from our experience working with them. But Dan, I'll let you, you've introduced yourself already, but I'll let you talk a little bit more about Kindbridge and what you do. So the question goes like this. Research plays an important role in forming both policy and technology developments. Through the Kindbridge Research Institute, you've conducted a lot of research into some of the gaps we see in prevention as well as treatment. Can you tell us a bit more about the research and how you see technology helping to support both prevention of problem gambling as well as the treatment for those that have experienced gambling-related harm?
Yes. We only have 6 minutes. This will take an hour. So,
Do we really have just 6 minutes left?
yeah, I'll be as concise as I possibly can. So early on, when we started out, which was about 36 months ago now, one of the very first things that we did was go state by state and look at a set of 10 principles for our G strategies, and then audit each of the states, including the DoD on top of it to factor in military. And get a good idea on which states have what systems in place and which states don't. That kind of helped us open up the landscape to have a conversation with a handful of states that we saw massive gaps. And then the next big thing that we wanted to tackle was where are treatment providers across the states that are actually equipped to deal with a gambling problem. And the fact of the matter is there's just not very many out there. There's a handful of states that have got their own systems to train their own people, and they've got somewhere between 50 and 100 providers, which is good in most cases. And then there's states out there that have absolutely nothing and zero infrastructure. And you're seeing sports betting move into those territories now where there's a serious lack of infrastructure and a desire to actually build. So what we've done specifically as of late with the state of Colorado is start to build out a 5-year roadmap for them on what a population health strategy looks like. Where are all of the regions that really need a central focus when it comes to, are they just an at-risk population due to the makeup of the demographics in the region, the labor statistics in the region? Are they at risk for other regions due to culture? One of the things that sticks out to mind, Colorado's got about 1.2 million Latinos, and about 30% of them are uninsured, and about 35% of them are under the age of 18. So that right there to me is a population that needs some attention, and we need to work on some cultural competency, RG methods and products that speak directly to that group. And just sort of going state by state and inside of each state, region by region, county by county, looking at a variety of different public and population health metrics to just sort of paint a picture, and then put a real prevalence tool on top of it that we can monitor in a much more, instead of taking a snapshot in time, but more like get an update on a monthly basis or a weekly basis if we can get there, and have sort of a living, breathing approach to the problem as it evolves and pops up. So that's what we're finding. There's a lot on the addiction side that needs to be addressed, but I think what we have to also understand is that people who are coming onto the platform, there's such a huge market out there, and gambling is entertaining by all means, right? But I think the one thing everyone has to keep in mind is, unfortunately, in this country, roughly 50% of the population is already dealing with the mental health problem that they're bringing into the game, right? So when you consider that and you consider what next steps need to be when something more serious is identified, again, I think solutions in that space are, they need to be well thought through, and technology can be used to reach those folks. And it can be used well. I mean, like just putting up access to an application that can route you to either a peer support group, a coach, or a counselor. Once they get into the system and they can start doing work, you can get them over to psychiatry or medication management. It's extremely important when you think about really where the future of all of this is going and how much we can do because of telemedicine now. I tried.
No, that was excellent. Really interesting anecdotes there. This next question is in regards to artificial intelligence and basically the benefits and opportunities that it presents, but also the risks in implementing it into responsible gambling technology. Can any of you comment on how you see it can be used for good and the potential downsides to it as well?
I'm happy to try and start. It's obviously a fascinating question, one that we at FanDuel are certainly very focused on and looking into. From a positive standpoint, the more that we can understand about our customers, through AI, through machine learning, the better. And a lot of risk factors can kind of go into that, right? And risk factors that would be hard for someone kind of manually to go through. How much are they playing? What time of day are they playing? If we know if someone has a 9 to 5 job, but they're playing 1 to 4 a.m., That's concerning. Understanding that. Are they rapidly increasing how often they're depositing, how much they're depositing, how much they're canceling withdrawals? The scale we're at right now to use machine learning to give us that information back would be very, very beneficial. But there's things that we need to understand too about knowing our customers, right? If I am someone who, let's say, earns around $30,000 a year, and Dan earns $300,000 a year, and Cheyenne earns $500,000 a year, but we're all betting around the same amount, well, we should be approached differently. So we would need to understand that information. There's a lot of work to be done, but if it can get us to be more proactive in connecting with customers, building off DG best practices, the better. Because the more we can educate our customers on potential problems, but how to regulate their play, that's beneficial for player protection.
I think from a regulatory's point of view, anytime you have a situation where you can have some sort of AI or system that helps you with a predictive model of, based on what's going on in the past, this may be predictive of possibly an at-risk patient, anything like that could be beneficial. But I think Adam said it perfectly. At the end of the day, it boils down to knowing your customer and then knowing how to reach them. And based on that information that you might be able to get, it might make it a little bit easier for you, more beneficial.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add on it is like just err on the side of caution when it comes to using AI as an intervention tool for individuals who are experiencing any kind of mental health issue. The human touch is much more effective. That's it. I think the AI is fantastic when it comes to identifying and bucketing groups of individuals that we can monitor and look at and keep an eye on for safety purposes and better knowing customers and all of that. But I think when a push comes to shove, if you're dealing with an individual that needs help, its best bet is to make sure that you're always providing that human intervention.
That's great. In the interest of time, I'll move on to the second last question here. Third last question. This is on the role of collaboration. We spoke about it a little bit before in terms of the New Jersey model being propagated and seen elsewhere. But to what extent do you all see collaboration amongst regulators, industry, and the nonprofit sector being an important factor to making gambling safer and reduce gambling-related harm? Can you share examples of how partnership and collaboration have enabled innovation and more effective use of data and technology?
Yes.
Yes. Just furthermore, how can industry policymakers, charity workers, and academics effectively collaborate on this front?
Anybody else want to go? Or you want me to just go? Okay, cool. Collaboration is sort of key to making all of this happen. For us, Playtech's been phenomenal with helping us get started in the research space and produce as much as we've produced, as fast as we've been able to produce it. At a regulator level, I think there's a lot of curiosity, a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns around how to deal with situations that develop beyond RG and how to build out that infrastructure. But I think a lot of people are listening, and I think a lot of people are interested in having the conversation, and I think there's a decent amount of funds that are starting to arrive to help in that space, because I think everybody recognizes that it's a space that needs attention as much as this is going to advance, and if we want to get farther down into the iGaming route as well. And I just, I don't think anybody's interested in leaving this element of it behind. It's just sort of a less sexy part of the equation. But from my perspective, I'm getting open ears and a lot of conversations that are making me feel like it's all moving in the right direction.
From a regulator's point of view, I think collaboration is the absolute key to all of this. Dan did a nice job before of mentioning all the different research that he's identified and certain demographics, and that's all absolutely critical information to know. From our perspective, we know, or let me rephrase, we're not naive to think that we know it all. And that Adam mentioned before, a lot of experience, a lot of other jurisdictions, that we may not have that kind of experience that they do. They've been in the industry for a lot longer when it comes to online gaming. And so we want to take advantage of that information, because they may come to us and say, we see what your goal is, we understand exactly what you want, let's all work together to get there. And as time moves on, more literature is going to be written, more research is going to be conducted, and we're going to learn more together. But for this to be really successful, everyone, all the internal stakeholders to this entire industry need to collaborate to make sure we sustain this industry.
Yeah, just to add, from an operator point of view, we're in a competitive business. when we think about RG, we think about player protection. That's not competitive. That's collaborative, right? We all want to further that. It's in everyone's best interest, of course. We want to protect the players. A lot of work's been done. What more can we do, right? From an operator point of view, we'd like a national 1-800 number to be used in every jurisdiction to make it simpler for consumers to get help. We also need to educate those consumers on the purpose of a resource like 1-800-GAMBLER. It is not for, I forgot my password, which is a pain point for many jurisdictions. We have customer service agents who are ready to help you with that. If you're in crisis or have a loved one in crisis, how can you get the help you need? We need to help those trained professionals be the resource. Nationwide self-exclusion, how can we kind of pull that across jurisdictions to protect players? And it's great to see the head nodding. That's something we want a lot of work. That's collaboration to kind of get there on two resources that are key, in my view, and I hope we all agree in terms of enhanced player protection.
Great. Actually, this leads me to my last question. And we've looked across the different states that have introduced legislation and legalized sports wagering recently. Ohio being one of them that has dished out some record-breaking fines, usually pertaining to such things as responsible gambling, let's say irresponsible advertising. Let's keep it at that. Do you see that responsible gambling will become more prevalent and voluntary from the operator front, or is it going to take more widespread crackdowns and fines being dished out in order for that to actually become more prevalent?
I think it's going to be a combination of both. I think it's something that the operators, as they see what's going on in different jurisdictions, are going to want to proactively make sure they don't run into any different issues. From our perspective, we're also trying to help provide guidance, because sometimes operators may just need guidance on exactly what do you guys need in this jurisdiction to make sure we're doing everything to meet your expectations. And so the advertising is a great example. We're actually working with all the operators right now regarding advertising best practices, because we feel that advertising fits very well with responsible gaming. And so we didn't want to just stop with the automated triggers. We want to take it one step further, and now we're working with advertising best practices, and we've developed 15 bullet points that, again, collaboratively with the industry, we've provided to them. We're taking their feedback in on that and what they think is going to be critical in terms of getting us to where we all want to be. And so it's something that I think it's going to be a combination of operators wanting to proactively be involved and also the regulators coming up with their own initiatives as well, and then together coming up with a more robust plan.
It's a difficult question. Obviously, you're trying to find a balance here, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Any further comment or?
Yeah, I mean, it was very well said. It's obviously understanding the regulations, having a conversation, the ability to have a conversation. Obviously, New Jersey, the ability that they provide to give feedback on various best practices is key. From FanDuel, our goal is simple. We want to exceed every regulation. So we obviously, no one's perfect. We're not perfect. We want to keep getting better, of course. How do we do that? And how can we give input and saying, hey, this isn't working from our perspective. We have a conversation about that to see something that may work from your point of view for your jurisdiction.
I think you'll have a lot of operators out there that are sort of the mindset of like move fast and innovate on this. And then I think you'll just have a lot of them that are just sort of slow to the game. We'll wait for everybody else. Standards come in place, and then they'll just adopt it sort of slowly. But I think, like my experience so far, there's a lot of the tier ones that are just moving really fast on this to try to get out in front of it. Developing their own content, bringing to the table a set of principles that sort of goes above us and beyond and makes us sort of question standards and how we can be better, right? So I think these guys hit it on the head, and I think my only comment on it is I think you'll have early adopters and late adopters, just like everything else.
And the only thing I was going to add is we're already seeing in New Jersey operators being proactive in changing some of their advertising, changing certain words to not say risk-free and things along those lines. They're already reaching out to us, telling us and informing us, by the way, every advertisement going out, we're removing certain words, we're going to make things more clear. It's another good example of the industry recognizing they're going to, on their own, do a lot of things to improve those operations, because like I said before, I think we all can agree we have the same common goal here, all of us, whether it's the operators, the regulators. We just want to sustain this industry, and responsible gaming advertising is a piece of that.
Thank you. We can't even do one more question, can we? All right.
We could talk for hours.
It was a great one, but no. We'll save it for next time.
Thank you, everybody, for joining this panel. It really was informative. And yeah, thank you all for attending.